SID by Auriga Ifill. Exterior, Tokyo City, Japan, day. On screen, Tokyo, Japan, 2073. Tokyo City, Japan is completely abandoned. There are no human beings in sight. Many shop windows are broken. Cars in the streets are turned over or burnt out. Trash litters the streets. Clothing and toy stores are fully stocked. Food stores and pharmacies are completely empty. Small towns and residential areas are abandoned. Exterior, Tokyo City, Japan, day. On screen, 2150, 77 years later. Trees and bushes grow through the cracks in the ground and on buildings. Cars are covered in foliage. Various animals walk the streets as flocks of birds fly above the city. Much like the city's residential properties are covered in plant life. Exterior, Tokyo, morning. On screen, 2273, 200 years later. SID, a tall, slender, and attractive woman with shoulder-length brown hair, walks through the city. She wears a black leather jacket, black knee-high boots, black colored pants, and a purple top. She has 3 drones following her, one ahead, one behind, and one which is moving around independently. She walks past a building that has vines hanging from it. She looks at it and sees there is something spray-painted under the vines. She casually walks over to the vines and pushes them aside. Still unable to see the entire graffiti, she pulls on the vines. They break off in her hand, falling near her as she steps back. She grabs another bunch of vines, this time more firmly. She gives it a couple test pulls, then finally pulls with force as she runs away from the falling vines as they come crashing down, kicking up dust and debris. Through the debris clearing, we see the graffiti on the wall, the words, "Save us from BZE," spray-painted in bold yellow letters. SID stands and looks at it a moment before continuing on her way. She arrives at the base of a skyscraper, the tallest in the city. She stops and looks up at the top of the building and looks around before entering. Interior, Tokyo City, Japan, skyscraper, day. SID enters with the drones. She walks past some elevators which are clearly not in functioning order. Finding stair access step after step after step, SID and the drones finally arrive at the roof access of the skyscraper. Pushing the door's handle, she has to force the door open due to stiffness. Exterior, Tokyo skyscraper, roof, day. The door has some bush growing over it. The door is pushed open a little, then some more, then finally flings open and leaves and debris fall to the floor. SID steps over the debris and walks to the edge of the roof as the drones remain near her. Taking out a picture from her pocket, we see Tokyo before the destruction. She looks over the city. She turns around, placing the picture back into her pocket, and then reaching into her bag, she pulls out a cuboidal electronic device. It is white and clean like new. She places it on the highest point of the roof and taps the button on top. The device begins to pulse like a beacon. SID climbs down and walks through the door on the roof back into the building. The 3 drones remain on the roof with the beacon. Interior, Tokyo skyscraper, day. SID walks back down the stairs of the building, and as she enters back into the lobby, a pack of lions are entering the building. SID stops in her tracks as one of the lions looks up at her. SID stands still. After a moment, a single drone enters through the door from outside and moves past the lions to grab their attention. The lions watch the drone as eventually one of them becomes interested and slowly moves toward it. SID sees an opportunity to start moving away from the lions, but is spotted and a chase ensues through the building. The drone shoots one of the lions with a dart before chasing after the other lions. The lions chase SID. She finds safety in a storage room and waits out enough time until it's safe to leave after the lions have been tranquilized. When SID is walking back through the building, she comes across one of the lions. It is hazily falling asleep as she approaches. She strokes it as it growls at her. She rubs its belly and ruffles its neck.
You're quite cute when you're sleeping.
SID leaves the lions to fall asleep and leaves the skyscraper. Exterior, Tokyo, day. SID heads back out through the city to a hover bike, which starts up as she approaches. She gets on and rides out at high speeds through traffic and destruction as Jimi Hendrix All Along the Watchtower begins to play. During SID's journey, a contingent of drones pass her on the way to the city. Exterior, Tokyo mansion, dusk. SID has returned home to a large mansion estate. The surrounding area is overgrown, but the mansion is tidy and well kept by the various bots which execute menial labor tasks on the property. Sid jumps off of the hoverbike as it drives itself into a docking station in an opening garage. Sid enters the mansion. Interior mansion, dusk. The inside of the mansion is also clean due to the diligent work of bots. Now inside the mansion, Sid heads toward an office. She takes off her jacket, placing it on a chair. In the offices, we see pictures of a family, none of which Sid is in. She walks up to a bookcase and pulls a book, opening up the bookcase to a door with a key code. She enters the code. On screen, 842211. The door opens up into a brightly lit, clinically clean interior. Interior mansion, basement lab, dusk. Sid enters the clinically clean stairway. It leads to a decontamination chamber, which leads into a lab with many computers and books. We see bots working on embryos and stem cell research. Sid enters the decontamination chamber and is decontaminated before entering the lab. On the wall are pictures of some failed attempts at creating human life, showing disfigured embryos. Sid walks past a computer. The screen turns on automatically and data begins to be loaded to the machine. We see a mapping of the city being uploaded with a new design. Exterior, Tokyo, factory, morning. On screen, 2276, 203 years after. Sid is outside a bush-covered factory with a large contingent of bots and drones surrounding her. The large gates to the factory are broken. One is still standing. The other has fallen away from the wall it was attached to. Sid pulls the large gate as if it was a bed sheet, moving it out of the way so the bots can pass through. They enter the factory interior and get to work repurposing the equipment and installing power to the machinery and renovating it to a pristine working order. Exterior, Tokyo factory, morning. Work is taking place on the large skyscraper from the ground up. There is now a huge contingent of bots working on the building, moving away trees and bushes, shredding them into piles and cleaning away debris. The old cars in front of the building are being taken away by bots to the renovated factory to be processed and turned into new materials. Panes of glass are being replaced by the bots, and the building is being renovated into something utopian. Interior mansion basement lab, night. On screen, 2280, 207 years after. Sid is standing looking at the embryos as screens behind her on the wall are flashing with research information. Sid walks over to a workstation and sits down. She pulls out an old Rubik's Cube from a desk drawer and begins to slowly solve it with her eyes closed. She then stops and opens her eyes, raising her eyebrows.
It's simple, when you know how.
The embryo is flushed from the liquid chamber that it is in. Work on a new embryo starts in the same chamber. Code is being written on a screen which Sid isn't looking at. She finally stands and leaves the room, and work continues in the lab. As Sid leaves, we see the old Rubik's Cube on the desk, solved. Interior, mansion, basement lab, night. On screen, 2072, 11 months before. Dr. Amy Kimojima, a tall, slender woman wearing a white lab coat, is standing working over groups of rats in cages while recording her experiments to find a cure for BZE. She records a video log of her experiments.
Day 98, and still, I'm unable to isolate sufficient antibiotics from test animals for human application.
Dr. Amy Kojima leaves the lab and heads back into the mansion. Exterior mansion terrace, night. Hideo Kojima is sitting on the terrace working on a laptop. He is busy tapping away on the keyboard when Amy Kojima walks out onto the terrace. She sits down as conversation starts, rubbing her eyes as she does so.
Any progress?
No. The mice are still immune, and I can't figure out why.
You'll figure it out. You always do.
But what if I don't this time? Everyone dies, which will eventually include our daughter.
Hideo stops typing and looks up at Amy.
I have to believe that won't happen.
Amy pauses and smiles at Hideo, who then continues working.
Are you almost done with the coding?
Hideo Kojima looks back up at his wife with a raised eyebrow.
No, I'm a month away at minimum.
It's a good idea. Have you given it a name yet?
She.
Sydney, a young girl of about 8 years of age and a striking resemblance to Sid, walks out onto the terrace and is holding an unsolved Rubik's Cube and a red blanket.
Why are you still awake?
Sydney smiles devilishly as small children do. Sydney places the Rubik's Cube on the table next to Hideo as she then goes to Amy, who picks her up and hugs her as she sits in her lap, resting on her mother's chest.
Okay, Sydney, up you come.
Amy holds on to Sydney tightly as she rests her face on her daughter's head. Hideo then proceeds to look at the Rubik's Cube a moment before slowly solving it and placing it down in front of Amy and Sydney.
It's simple when you know how.
Hideo smiles and gives Sydney a double wink. Sydney smiles as she watches her father. Interior mansion, basement, day. On screen, 2281, 208 years after. Sid is overlooking two small human babies inside of two separate water chambers side by side in the lab. One is male, the other is female. Interior newsroom, night. On screen, New York, USA, 2072, 18 months before. A reporter is interviewing a Dr. Melvin Hess of the World Health Organization.
Good evening. Tonight we are joined by Dr. Melvin Hess of the World Health Organization. Dr. Hess has more detailed information on the superbug causing major concern in the scientific community. Dr. Hess, good evening.
Good evening. To correct you, this thing is a major concern to the entire global community.
It's really that bad?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Dr. Hess, my understanding is that we now know the root cause of the superbug being named BZE.
Simply put, decades of ignoring our impact on the Earth, which has given way to the glaciers melting. This in turn has caused the releasing of gases, which as far as we can tell, contained BZE.
Why are there no cures or treatments for BZE?
As it is right now, every year there are fewer and fewer antibiotics being discovered due to the growing resistance of many bacteria. And when something like this happens, these are bacteria that we have never come into contact with before. These are bacteria that have been trapped under the ice since the dinosaurs roamed the planet.
What is the scientific community doing about the lack of antibiotics?
Well, there are huge amounts of money being poured into research, but the results have not been very optimistic.
And in terms of BZE?
Dr. Hess sits staring blankly at the table.
Dr. Hess?
This really could be the one.
When you say the one, Dr. Hess, what exactly do you mean?
Dr. Hess pauses. Exterior Tokyo, day. On screen, 2281, 208 years after. We see that a small area of the city is now reconstructed with improvements, all stemming from the main skyscraper. There are no more vehicles on the road. Trees and bushes are all cleared away, and a mini utopia exists in the midst of a jungle. Interior mansion, basement, day. Sid enters the lab and watches the birth of the newborn babies. They are removed from the water chambers by mechanical arms and placed onto towels as Sid goes about cleaning and clothing them. On screen, September 3rd, 2988. First human births in 915 years. Exterior Tokyo, morning. Sid is walking with two children holding her hands through the newly built city of Tokyo. Interior newsroom, night. On screen, 2072, 18 months before.
For a long time there's been a back and forth over what will manage to wipe out humans from the face of the earth. BZE may in fact be the answer to that question.
Fade out, the end.